All right, welcome everyone to this deep dive on the session Future Shock Against the Tyranny of the Present. I'm Tim and I'll take you through this deep dive today. And we're very happy that Eden is joining us to answer your questions. Eden, welcome. Thanks for being here. Hi.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Very good. I'm very much looking forward to talking about the future with you for the next couple of hours, as this is our last deep dive for today on this channel. But first of all, before we start, let's have some quick notes on how this is going to work for everyone joining us for the first time. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can ask questions using the raise your hand function in Zoom. I'll then call your name and you can ask your question. You can also ask questions using the Zoom chat. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can ask questions using Mentimeter. Just go to menti.com and enter the code 719221. That's menti.com, and then the code is 719221. Very much looking forward to your questions. You can also ask in German. I'll do my very best to translate. And we're very much also looking to maybe have some questions directly on Zoom. So let's get right into it. Winter is coming, the future is coming. That's what I got from your talk, among many other things. You also talked about the Corona crisis. Maybe let's start with that because that's something that's on everyone's mind right now.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What will you tell our grandkids, or what will you say, and how will people look back in 100,000 years on the Corona crisis? Is it just a footnote in history compared to other historic events?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what people 100,000 years from now will say, obviously, but I can guarantee you that they will not talk about the coronavirus crisis. That's why history is very complicated, right? We look back on, let's say, a minor battle, that took place after a famous one, and we don't remember it, right? For example, the year 1789, French Revolution. What about 1790? For some people, that was the most important year of their lives, right? Maybe they lost everything they had, or maybe they won the war, or they had a child. We don't talk about those events, and even global events that are completely forgotten. So I don't know what they will be saying, but they won't be talking about coronavirus. But I think that is a very important question, because we can change it a bit and ask, what will people in 5 years or in 10 years say about the coronavirus crisis? And that will be a very important question that a lot of very powerful people will want to control. They'll want to control that narrative. And I kind of talk about it in my talk, and it's very important for me to bring this up. We're already seeing the story being told, right? And the story is, no one could have seen this coming. This is a black swan event. It's a once in a lifetime. Whereas we have very clear charts showing more and more epidemics happening in the last 30 years. We have epidemiologists that have been warning us for 15 years. We have governments that have been trying to prepare for this. And yet the story is more and more becoming of an unforeseen, unpredictable event. So that's just one example of how the narrative and the story will be told in the years to come.
We are waiting for questions coming in. Just go to menti.com and use the code 719221. Now, digging into the Corona crisis once more, does this make your job more difficult? Is it harder to predict the future scenarios now that we are on a different path, which we weren't even aware of a couple of months ago?
Yeah, I mean, I end my talk, I'm just getting to it now while the talk is still playing. There's a slide that I skipped though that says, death to prediction, long live speculation. So my job is like working for a tech company, right? But what I do when I do philosophy and history is not to predict, it's to speculate. Prediction tries to guess or prophesize what will be, whereas speculation wants to offer alternatives. So actually my job in speculating is maybe a bit easier now with the coronavirus crisis, because it has really nailed home the idea that things can go in many different ways. You can think that the most stable thing in your life, I'll give you a personal example. I've had dinner with my mom on Friday nights every single week, with like maybe one or two for the last 10 to 15 years. And that was like a constant in my life. And in one day, it just vanished, right? So that makes my job a bit easier, because now when I ask people, well, imagine all your life is completely different, they're like, okay, yeah, that just happened to me. That seems likely. Maybe it will happen again. So it's made people more receptive to speculation and rethinking about the future.
You also talk about that now is the time, this is the chance to think more radical about things, right?
Yeah.
Now, the more unpredictable the future comes, maybe also people in power have this, that they are thinking more radical. Is that the hope you have?
I hope so. I say in a talk, like for a brief second, I mentioned politicians, and then I say, well, at least I hope that they're thinking about it. But to be very clear, we can't sit around and hope, right? That's one of my main points. We can't hope that politicians will fix this for us, right? The promise of the system that we are in, of the present, is just trust us, give us your freedoms, give us like a bit of your agency, and we'll make sure that everything will be okay. You can go to college, your kids can go to college, you can have a job, you'll have a retirement plan. And in some places on the planet, that's true, right? But in some places, it's really not. And that promise is what keeps us going. And this crisis, I hope, will show people that it's not enough to hope that things will be okay. We have to demand the future that we want to see. It's not okay that 5 years ago, our governments weren't preparing for this properly. It's not okay that across the entire of Western society, budgets have been cut again and again to our health departments. We can't just hope that our politicians will do our jobs for us. We have to become more engaged and make sure that they do. And I hope that this crisis shows that to people. And just another tiny thing on this question, it shows people the power that they have to affect other people, right? Because the virus is exponential. Just one person not paying attention to the guidelines, just one person not washing their hands, not wearing a mask, going to places they shouldn't go, and 50, 100, 500, 5,000, 50,000 people can be infected. So it shows us that we are all in this together, whether we'd like to believe that we are or not.
So what would be your optimal future look like? How radical should it be?
Super radical. I mean, I don't make it a secret, right? On this talk or in any of my other talks, I'm a socialist. I'm a communist. I don't believe in capitalism. I don't believe in the way that our society is being organized right now. But that's easy to say, right? Again, it's that utopian thinking. In the future, everything will be free, whatever. So I want to talk about like the next 5 years. What I want to see in the next 5 years from our societies is to understand a few things. One, borders are a recommendation. Nature doesn't care about borders. The virus doesn't care about borders. The virus goes wherever it wants. And climate change doesn't care about borders. So thinking about borders is okay for the day-to-day, but when the crisis hits, or preferably before crisis hits, we need to stop thinking about borders. And you saw things inside the European Union that you don't want to see. It's very complicated, like Italy and Germany and the Czech Republic and France and all these interrelationships, but also globally with China being categorized as this other. So all these ideas don't matter. The virus doesn't care about in which country you live. So that's one. Two, to understand that our relationship with nature is untenable. We cannot keep doing what we're doing to nature. And coronavirus, COVID, is a direct result of that, of our invasion of nature, of our exploitation of animals, of our industrialization of the storage and use and commerce. And we can't just stop one day, but we need to start thinking about alternatives. We need to start thinking globally about how can we do things differently in our relationship with nature. And lastly, just one last thing, I know we don't have a lot of time. This whole idea of essential workers, right? What I want to happen tomorrow is that all of those essential workers risking their lives for the rest of society go on strike, right? And say, no more food deliveries, no more nurses, no more garbage disposal until we get what is rightfully ours, which is a fair wage, health insurance, unionization, all of these things which suddenly, 6 months ago, maybe not in Germany because it has a very good welfare system, but in other countries on this planet, the US especially, but also where I live in Israel, you went to a delivery service person and you told them, you don't deserve to make minimum wage. You will make tips or below minimum wage. But suddenly, that delivery worker is literally keeping your country alive. So I would like in the next few years for us to understand that how much you're paid, how much you deserve in life has nothing to do with what you contribute to society and what is essential or inessential, and for us to start breaking apart those ties. I can keep going, but those are like the main things.
And I love listening to you. So if anyone out there has further questions, go to menti.com. The code for this session is 719221. Now, you mentioned a couple of things that are probably under the radar at the moment, like the refugee crisis, things going on in Europe, the climate crisis, of course. But at the same time, there's some topics where Corona might be like a catalyst for change and progress in those areas. So what do you make of this? Is this are some topics completely off the chart right now, completely unimportant, while others take the main stage?
Well, the answer is obviously yes, right? Like if you just turn on a news channel and you open a newspaper, or you even go online and read a news site, you'll see that everything is about COVID and the coronavirus. Now, with some of the lockdowns being lifted, maybe some more content is being pushed, but mostly everything is about COVID. And I don't know about you guys, everybody listening and you, I'm already tired of it, right? I'm already sick of it because it's the same thing over and over again. And that's what I talk about at the end of my talk. There's like so many op-eds and editorials and think pieces and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's a topic that is very much in the public eye today. But I also think that it's not bad that people are talking about it. Obviously, it's the number one thing that people care about, but how they talk about it is a problem. The number one problem is all this nonsense about, oh, nature is returning, humans are the actual virus, blah, 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 and this disease kind of shows how we need to disappear. That's nonsense. First of all, if you read actual scientists that have started to do research, the impact that COVID had on global emissions is negligent, because most emissions don't come from people driving cars or flying planes. It comes from industry and military and heavy construction, stuff like that. So that's just not true. But what it does show is that people want easy solutions. Tell me who's at fault. Who do I blame for what's happening? And the first instinct is, oh, those people. Now that those people are gone, not me, those people over there are gone, everything is going to be okay and nature's going to come back and everything's going to be great. And I would really want the news discourse on this to be the reverse. Look how important you are. Look how powerful you are. Look what effect we have on the planet. Yes, you're right. Nature is responding to our absence, but all the people are not going to disappear tomorrow. That would be terrible. But how do we reach these same levels of harmony with nature, and how do we curb our influences on nature even when there isn't a plague, even when there isn't a pandemic? So there's like a potential here for COVID-19 to change things, but also a risk for people to like check off easy solutions and say it's their fault.
We have questions coming in on Mentimeter from our viewers. The first one is, how can we foster ideas that will shape our future in a positive way? And who are the stakeholders, I guess?
Amazing question. Amazing. The number one question I think that we are facing today. And I think it's all about that difference between prediction and speculation that I spoke about. Look, when you read science fiction, there's many genres, but there are two main genres. One is hard science fiction, and one is soft or speculative science fiction. Hard science fiction tries to tell you what will be. Here's a cool new technology. Here's a ship. Here's a new gadget. Or here's a social order. What if our society was ruled by direct voting, right? And it tries to predict that future. When will it happen? How will it happen? Who will do it? How will the tech look? You can read that. That's fine if you like that as a thought experiment. But I'm here to tell you that that's boring. The important questions are the questions that speculative fiction is asking and that you should be asking yourself. And that is, what can be different about my life? What that I am taking for granted as obvious? I've always eaten meat. I've always lived under capitalism. I've always lived under democracy. So that's the only option. That is where you should be suspicious. And try to interrogate yourself and see what those assumptions that have to exist are, and then try to foster ideas that undermine those assumptions, right? Nothing is absolute. Everything can change. Everything has changed before. Capitalism is 250 or 300 years old. Democracy is 150 years old. Well, depends how you count, maybe 200. Cars are new. Telephones are new. Computers are new. All of these things didn't exist in the past and might not exist or exist in a different way in the future. So the ideas which you foster should be not how will computers look and how will they work and how will games look and how will cars look, but what if cars stop existing? What if our way of life stopped existing? Those are the ideas that we should be asking right now.
There's another question from Mentimeter. These are, by the way, some of the longest and most complex questions I've seen all day. There are many people who are scared of many things, who are not able to cope, uncertainty. So what do you tell them? Especially, do you have any experiences, and how not to lose those people that are scared to those who tell simple stories, which gives them hope?
Great question. Let me tell you a secret. I'm scared. I'm really scared. Like 2 years ago, the IPCC, that's the UN Commission on Climate Change, published a report basically saying that it's bad. I'm not going to swear, but it's worse than bad, right? It's like completely disastrous. And we can do things, but it's going to be very hard. And I've been scared ever since, because I want to grow old in a world where I can live my life and not be afraid. And I know a lot of people who are scared. But I think that what we have to tell them is a few things. One, what I said during the talk. Fear is passive. Fear is you waiting for something to happen to you. You need to take control of your life. You need to take control of your future and the future of the people that you love. And fear and hope are two sides of the same coin. So don't fall into the trap of letting your fear paralyze you, but also don't fall into the trap of everything will be great, just hope and keep a positive attitude and it will be okay, because it won't be. That's the first thing. The second thing, try to break things down. There's a really good video from Chris Hadfield, who is a Canadian astronomer who was in the space station. And for COVID, he did a video. Let me tell you a technique of how astronauts deal with fear, because it's really scary to be up there, right? And the first thing he says is, it's 4 steps. And the first thing is, know the risk. Understand the risk. Don't let fear stay nebulous, abstract, undefined. What is the actual risk that is going to happen to you that you are facing? So it's easy to say, climate change. What does that mean? I live in Israel. You live in Germany. You live in the US or the UK or in China or in Turkey. Climate change will look very different to us. I need to worry about the seas rising because they're going to destroy the sewer system in where I live. But people in Germany don't need to worry about that. Well, most of them at least. But they do need to worry about storms getting stronger and droughts getting worse and stuff like that. So try and break it down, and you'll find that the fear kind of diminishes, because now it's no longer climate change, but it's like specific problems that you can work and fix. And the last thing, and the most important thing, talk to people. Talk to each other. and in places that aren't expected. Don't just talk to your family and your mother and your father and your spouse or your best friend. Talk to your coworkers. Talk to people on the street. Talk to people at a bar. Talk about these things where you're not supposed to, right? Because we have this reflex or instinct not to talk about our fear and to only like talk to our echo chambers. Don't do that. Say that you're afraid. Tell people, I am afraid, I am anxious, this worries me. What are you going to do? Do you feel the same? Share the fear, and you'll find that it diminishes a bit, right? And well, I said the last thing, but really the last thing. When those people who are afraid come to you, don't tell them don't be afraid. Don't say you are wrong to be afraid. The first thing you should say is what I did. I'm also afraid. It's okay to be scared. These are scary things. Don't try to put like a veneer of hope on it. Just say, we're afraid, we're all afraid, but now let's talk about what can actually be done.
We also have another question directly to talk. You spoke about speculative fiction. That's the word. Can you recommend some?
Well, that's a that's a problem asking me, because do you have 5 hours? I can like keep going on and on and on. But I'll try my best to like narrow it down. So there's the 2 books that I spoke about in the talk. Oval by Elvia Wilk, which is really excellent, and she's like a younger writer, so I can't recommend it enough. And Jeff Vandermeer. There's classics like Ursula Le Guin, who is my favorite writer of all time. You can read Left Hand of Darkness or The Dispossessed or The Telling, all books which deal with how societies are changing and how they might look in the future. There's really a lot of really great voices out there today doing a lot of work with speculative fiction. You can read Peter Watts, who's a Canadian author. His book Blindsight deals a lot with anxiety and fear and posthumanism and biology. You can read Ada Palmer, who's an historian, and in her series of books, she tries to speculate about what if the Enlightenment, the 18th century movement, came back and we ran our utopia using Enlightenment ideas. Will that be bad? Will that be good? Spoiler, it's bad, but also quite kind of good. And we can really go on and on and on. There's a lot of really good books being released about it. I recommend a good way to find them is to either go on Twitter and follow authors like Jeff Vandermeer and Elvia Wilk and see what they recommend, and from there find new people. But also follow awards, right? Like the Nebula Awards or the Locus Awards. Awards for these books, not all of them are good, but a lot of them are really great. While I was talking, I was cheating. I opened my list. So now I can make more recommendations. And by the way, this is really important for me before I give like a few more. Please try and read women and also non-binary people, queer folk, and also non-Westerns. When we do these lists, there's a lot of men and men who live, cis men and men who live in the West. And this is the future. And the future is for all of us. And we need to do a better job at working those voices in. So you have The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Bolander. Brilliant, sad book, but super powerful and strong. And you have maybe one last one. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, I'll recommend a man, but do me the favor and like read beyond that. There's a lot of really interesting work done by Greg Egan, who's an Australian writer. He wrote a book called Perihelion Summer, which is about climate change, but not in the way you think it is. I won't spoil it, but there's black holes. It's kind of weird and off kilter. And we can keep going, but I think that's a good start.
There are more questions coming in. I hope you brought some time.
I'm here, yeah. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, let's just keep going. There's a comment. Thanks for answering the question about people being scared. For me, this means that we should help those people to reflect themselves and not only fill them with information which might scare them. Is that something you agree?
Can you repeat the question? I was reading the chat.
I'm doing the same age. So the question about people being scared, and for the person asking the question, that would mean that we should help those people to reflect themselves, and not only fill them with information which might scare them even more. So just, people focusing more on themselves, on what they know, and not so much consuming, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good
approach.
question. Yeah, so when I read the IPCC report in 2018, my first reaction was to spend 6 months just reading and reading and reading and consuming, and I didn't sleep at night, and I had like 50 tabs open, and that's bad for you. It was bad for me, gave me a lot of anxiety, and it wasn't good for me. And then the 2 months after that, I didn't read anything, and that's also not good. Just in denial and distancing yourself. So what's the answer? First of all, each individual knows when it's too much for them. And you should 100% exercise self-care. It's okay to tell people, listen, I can't do this right now. Can we not talk about this? Can we talk about this later? Can we not talk about this ever? It's too much for me. It's totally legit. You should never tell people, no, you have to engage, and so on. Never. However, fear likes lack of detail. Fear likes the darkness. That's why we're afraid of the dark. It's what's in there. When the light is on, we can see what's in there. When the dark is there, our mind starts to fill it with the worst things possible. Same thing here. When you say something so abstract as climate change, it's really easy to get scared of that, because what does that mean? It can mean anything. It can mean like literally monsters coming to your house and eating you. So information can be a very good way to combat that. However, and this maybe goes back to one of the first questions about like, what will this change? I hope that this pandemic will show us that science communication is absolutely essential. It is one of the most important skills on the planet right now. How do you take information and communicate it properly to people who are scared? Because just saying, here's an article in Nature or in Science or in Lancet, read this, that's a bad idea. That will only freak people out more, because they don't have the tools to understand what's written. So we have to think about how we're communicating and how we're giving people information. And the last thing I want to say is there are ways to disconnect, right? There are ways to not consume information. It doesn't have to be a binary. Either you consume information or you don't. You can go down to one article a week. You can only read articles about a certain topic. You can read them with friends. You can do so many things that aren't just either I overconsume or I don't consume, right? And this is, we talk about radical, this is a radical idea. The ability to do that will become essential in the next 10 to 15 years, more so than today. We will have to figure out how to stay engaged without getting overwhelmed. How do you do that? I'm still figuring it out, but as we go along, it will be more and more crucial for us to learn that skill.
All right. For everyone, feel free to jump in on Zoom as well. Just raise your hand if you want to join in this conversation. There is one comment on Mentimeter, that list you are reading off. Could you share that with the audience somehow? What's your Twitter handle? Is that a place where people can hit you up?
So first of all, feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I left it at the end of my talk, but it's at Tallest Eden. I'll also write it in the chat right now. I can do two things at the same time. Follow me on the. I also run a page called Anarchy SF. It's an archive for anarchist science fiction. We have a podcast there. I run it with my very good friend Yanai, who's also a really interesting person. That is at Anarchy_SF. Sorry that my keyboard is loud.
You have to choose in the settings to write to the viewers and audience as well. I'm just copy pasting now so that everyone can see your chat messages on Zoom as well.
Okay, yeah, I just changed that. Cool. So that's one thing. You can go and follow me now. As for the list itself, I'll think about it. It's like my personal list that I maintain to keep track of my reading. There's a lot on there. Some of it is stuff that I don't necessarily endorse. It's just stuff that I read and stuff that I want to read. I actually use a tool that allows me to send a link to this list. But again, I'm kind of hesitant, right? Because again, there might be some stuff on here that I don't necessarily think that people should read or might not be good. There's like personal ratings that I put down. But if you want more, recommendations, or you want to ask me more questions, just seriously, just feel free to hit me up on Twitter. I'm more than happy to answer all your questions.
Let's do 2 more if you're up for it.
Yeah, 2 more was great.
I'll commend this one has a couple of upvotes. What would be your perfect future scenario, and is one possible future way of organizing society anarchism?
Okay, wow, that's a big one. Yeah, so it's a journey, okay? And I'll go even further and say, distrust anyone that has a simple answer to this question. Anyone that says, I know how the future should look, run away immediately. Don't listen to that person, because that's usually people who want to take advantage of you. The future is many things. It is not one scenario. And I guess if we were at a bar having beer or at a talk and you would ask me that question, I would answer it with a question and say, well, for who? When? My ideal future is not necessarily the ideal future for you or for someone living on the other side of the planet. And I know that it's a cop-out. I know that I'm like dodging the question, but I feel like this is the right answer. I don't know. I'm constantly figuring it out. I'm constantly thinking about it. But there are like attributes that I can say that should totally be part of the future in order for me to even consider it for the status of desirable. One, the workers own the means of production. The people who actually make value and perform labor should be the ones running our states and our politics and our lives. We should be running the way that we create and change the planet. One. Two, culture and understanding and knowledge should be free. 100% free. Universities should not have a profit motive. Science journals should not be locked. Intellectual property should not exist. If I take this talk, someone wants to record it and resample it and chop it up and use my ideas, please do so. If you want to take the music that I have online, you can Google and find the band that I'm in. Take it. Do whatever you want with it. Not because I believe in some ideal of the artist or whatever, but just because I believe in cross-proliferation and in us changing each other and talking to each other. And the last prerequisite for a just society is that it thinks and interacts and plans for the future. And that's something that we don't do now. Capitalism and our current societies are really, really bad at preparing for the future, because what is the bottom line right now? Now, I haven't forgotten about anarchy.
Getting
there. My relationship with anarchy is very complicated. And on Monday, I might call myself an anarchist, and on Wednesday, I'll call myself a Marxist-Leninist, and on the next Sunday, I'll call myself a communalist, like, the joke about so many flavors of communism, right? It's a good idea. Anarchy is a good idea, at least some strains of anarchy. And I do believe that it's a correct idea for specific societies, like Native Americans trying to resist a pipeline, or people in France trying to prevent an airport from being built, or people in Israel demonstrating against the occupation and against the war and against the fence and everything that the Israeli state does. But it also has its limitations. It's not a good way to run a society that is under attack, right? To run a society that is surrounded by capitalism and other societies. So I feel like, yes, it is a good idea that has advantages, but we also need to recognize its limitations and understand that we might want to work towards it one day, right? Because in Leninism or Marxist-Leninism, the state one day disappears and the state ceases to exist, but there are many steps that have to happen before that. And one last thing, it's not, and I don't mean to, whoever asked that question, it's a great question. I don't mean to like attack you or anything. It's not the important question right now. Anarchists, Marxists, communists, social democrats, Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, whoever you want, can all agree on 95% of the problems. And you know what? They can even agree on 75% of the solutions. Good enough. Let's get to work. It doesn't matter if you're an anarchist or a Marxist or whatever you want to call yourself. You know that climate change is coming. You know that the world is unjust. You know that people are suffering in prisons. You know that. We can start working without asking these questions if we ask the question, what is the future that we want?
There's a comment on Mentimeter that reached us. Amazing. Thank you so much for your input. And maybe last question. From a personal fan, I assume. I followed you in your way from summer is not coming, winter's also not coming, and the new weird. But I didn't really get the idea with the examples, books, etc. you gave. Please explain more.
It's a wide question. So I'll start maybe from what some of these books did to me. One of my main challenges in life, as I keep living and growing, is dismantling all the ways in which society told me how to be a man, right? What it means to be a man. I'm a very masculine person, and I identify as cis, but I want to unlearn the ways in which I'm supposed to be a man. You know, I'm supposed to be angry and not think about my emotions and be ambitious and cut to the point and be very powerful. And I've done a lot of work over the last like 5 to 10 years on dismantling it. And every time I think I'm done, I find out that I'm not. And that there are still things in the blind spot that I can't see that I can't get rid of. What helps me see that blind spot? What helps me see how I'm still being a man like society told me to? Reading good science fiction. Reading Elvia Wilkes' Oval made me suddenly realize that some of the things I still do in the relationship with my partner is stuff that I was raised to think about, to think as something good for a man, because she wrote something in her book. So the idea here is to use good fiction and to use the future and that shock and that trauma that good literature can create in us to look at the blind spot, right? To try and like peer behind and say, oh, that thing that I thought that I got rid of, or that thing that I didn't even notice, I have to deal with that and see it through looking into the future. So if I had like 30 more minutes to my talk, I would say that the technique, the goal here is to use the future to come back to the present, right? Good literature, good weird, good art like clipping or that report from the committee or other things like in that nature, they talk about the future, but they actually fold it back into our lives. That was the point I was trying to make. Don't fantasize about a utopia or dystopia. Think about futures that have something to say about our present. And maybe the last thing I'll say to this question is, what did you learn from Mad Max? Nothing. What did you learn from Children of Men? Nothing. Children of Men has a scenario where women stop giving birth. Is that relevant to you? Did women stop giving birth? They didn't. And Mad Max, society completely collapsed and everything is a desert. Okay, well, most of the people who are alive today won't ever live to see that scenario. So what exactly did it give me? But when you read Jeff Vandermeer's Dead Astronauts and you come to terms with how those characters think about knowledge and the world and perspective and challenges in diverse and dispersed ways, it gives you a different perspective on how you think about knowledge and the world and how you perceive the planet and how you might change who you are, right? So that's the idea. Don't think about distant, fantastic, sexy ideas. Think about complicated, nuanced, weird ideas that can help you break down your practices today.
Eden, thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was really great, really insightful. And I think we made a couple of people happy whose questions we answered tonight. Thank you so much. This was the last deep dive session on this channel, but you can always change your other channels. There's a lot going on still for a couple of hours, a lot of things to discover. That was it for Deep Dive 2. Eden, again, thank you very much. Take care.